You've been grinding, trying every productivity hack, every motivation trick in the book, yet you feel like you're stuck, constantly pushing against an invisible wall. And I know this isn't because you're lazy, or lack discipline, or just can't get it together. It's because your internal operating system, the silent narrative you built inside your head about yourself and the world, is actually sabotaging every single effort you make before you even start. We need to talk about this, because this isn't about working harder. It's about understanding the invisible levers that control your actions. What if I told you that your entire perception of reality and every single action you take is hardwired by these stories you tell yourself, and you might not even be aware of them? How do you multiply your productivity when your own mind is working against you? And look, I'm not here to feed you some fluffy, feel-good motivation. That stuff rarely sticks. What I will show you today is how to uncover these hidden narratives and replace them with empowering explanations that literally rewire your brain for clarity and unstoppable action. This isn't magic. It's understanding the fundamental psychology of how we decide and act. If you're tired of generic advice and want to grasp what truly drives change, stick with me, because we're about to dismantle some powerful internal roadblocks. So you feel that pull, right? That sense of being stuck even when you're doing all the right things. The problem isn't your effort. It's the stories whispering in your mind. This is the absolute foundation. Personal development, at its core, is about your perception of the world. Every single action you take, every choice you make, every time you hesitate or leap forward, is 100% determined by the internal explanations you hold. Think about it. If you believe, deep down, that you're not good enough or that a task is too hard, you'll find endless ways to procrastinate, even if logically you know it needs to be done. Your internal explanation, "I'm not good at this," becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, not because it's true, but because you acted on it. I remember for years, I wanted to start my own thing, build my own brand. But my internal explanation was, "Who am I to do this? There are so many experts out there. I don't have enough experience." This wasn't a conscious thought every day, but it was the silent narrative running in the background. It determined every decision. I'd research endlessly, take course after course, but never actually launch. Why? Because my internal explanation justified an action. It told me I needed more preparation, which was just a fancy word for not yet good enough. It drained my energy, made me feel perpetually behind, and kept my productivity at zero in the areas that truly mattered. This is why personal development isn't just about learning new skills. It's about changing the very framework through which you view yourself and your capabilities. If you want to multiply your productivity, you first have to understand the silent dictator inside your head. But how do these narratives get built in the first place? And what happens when they're incomplete or based on outdated information? The problem often starts with what I call a limited mental repertoire. Think of your mind as a vast library, or better yet, a digital file system. Every book you read, every conversation you have, every experience you live through, every piece of content you consume, it all becomes data in this system. Your mental repertoire is the sum of all this information. When your repertoire is limited, when you haven't intentionally fed your mind with diverse perspectives and knowledge, your internal explanations become just as limited. Let me give you an example I heard once that really stuck with me. Imagine someone who grew up in a small, isolated Indian village. Their entire world is contained within that village. If you ask them to explain how a modern city works, or the concept of global finance, their explanations will be incredibly limited, not because they're unintelligent, but because their mental file system lacks the data. They simply haven't been exposed to those concepts. It's the same for us. If our mental input is always the same social media feeds, the same friend group, the same type of books, our internal explanations for why things are the way they are will be incredibly narrow. We'll default to easy, often negative, explanations like, "I'm just not motivated," or "I'm bad with money," because those are the only files our mental system can access to make sense of our reality. For years, my repertoire consisted mostly of self-help books that focused on manifestation and positive thinking. While there's value there, it was an incomplete picture. So, my internal explanations for lack of progress were always about not visualizing enough or negative energy. It felt vague, ungrounded, and paralyzed me because I wasn't feeding my mind with the logical, practical frameworks needed for real change. Expanding your repertoire isn't just about reading more. It's about diversifying your inputs, consciously seeking out different viewpoints, and enriching your mental file system so you have more robust, nuanced, and empowering explanations at your disposal. If our explanations are so tied to what we know, how do we break free from what we are to become what we want to be? This brings us to a crucial point: why you shouldn't base your decisions, your aspirations, or your sense of capability solely on who you already are. This is the "you become good" principle. We often paralyze ourselves with internal narratives like, "I'm not a public speaker," or "I'm not disciplined," or "I'm not good at sales." These are not inherent truths. They are temporary snapshots of your current skill level, often reinforced by a limited repertoire of experiences. The truth is, you don't start good. You become good by doing. Progress isn't about preparation. It's about consistent action, even when you're uncomfortable. The athlete wasn't born with perfect technique. They trained, failed, adjusted, and became good. The entrepreneur wasn't born knowing how to build a business. They learned by trying, failing, and adapting. Your internal explanation, "I wasn't born for this," is a powerful barrier. It lets you off the hook. Instead, we need to build good explanations that provide clarity for action. The difference between "I wasn't born for this" and "I don't have experience yet" is monumental. The first is a fixed mindset, a dead end. The second is a growth mindset, an open door. When I finally wanted to launch my online course, my old internal narrative screamed, "You're not an expert. You don't have enough authority." But I had been intentionally expanding my repertoire, reading about building authority, about teaching, about personal branding. I learned from people who started small, who focused on impact over perfection. I reframed my internal narrative. "I don't have decades of experience like some, but I have unique experiences and a valuable perspective to share. I will get better by creating, not by waiting." This shift allowed me to break free from the paralysis. Good explanations focus on what you can do to bridge the gap between where you are and where you want to be. They emphasize process, learning, and growth. They transform excuses into action plans. For instance, instead of "I don't have time," a bad explanation, a good explanation is, "I haven't prioritized this enough, so I need to reevaluate my calendar and protect this time." Instead of "I'm bad with money," it's "I haven't learned enough about financial management yet, so I will dedicate 30 minutes a week to study it." This isn't about tricking yourself. It's about providing your mind with logical, actionable pathways instead of dead ends. So we've talked about what to change and how to reframe. But how do you really make this shift stick, transforming these insights into undeniable action that multiplies your productivity? So let's tie all this together, because the core of what we discussed today is profoundly simple, yet profoundly overlooked. That feeling of being stuck, of pushing against an invisible wall even when you're trying your best. It comes from the invisible stories, the internal narratives you're constantly telling yourself. Your entire perception of the world, every single action you take, is hardwired by these internal explanations. And the scary part is, many of them are built on limited mental repertoires, on outdated information, or simply on fear. This isn't about being lazy. It's about being fundamentally misaligned with your own mental operating system. We've unraveled why personal development is ultimately about shifting your world perception, how a limited mental file system restricts your possibilities, and why you should never base your future on your current self. You don't start good, you become good by taking action. The real power comes from consciously constructing good explanations, narratives that provide clarity for action instead of justification for inaction. When you internalize this, when you truly get that your productivity isn't a matter of motivation, but a consequence of your internal stories, everything changes. You stop blaming external circumstances or your innate abilities. You start looking inward, asking, what story am I telling myself about this situation? What explanations am I creating that limit my actions? It's not easy, I won't lie. This demands brutal honesty with yourself. But it simplifies everything because it gives you a clear point of leverage. Stop trying to hack your way out of a problem that exists in your own head. Start by changing the conversation inside. That's the real multiplier for your productivity. Here's the thing. You have a choice right now. You can keep pushing against that invisible wall, stuck in the same cycle of effort and frustration, powered by the old, limiting narratives. Or you can decide, right here, right now, to start rewriting those stories. This isn't about some massive, instant overhaul. It's about conscious, intentional practice day by day, reframing. I can't, into, I haven't learned how yet, or, I don't have time, into, I haven't prioritized this. The person you want to become, the person who effortlessly multiplies their productivity, who takes decisive action, who builds something truly meaningful, that person is waiting for you to change your internal dialogue. They're waiting for you to feed your mind with a richer repertoire, to tell yourself better stories. When you do this, you're not just changing your habits, you're changing your identity. You're building a self that is capable, resourceful, and in control of its own narrative. The clarity you gain, the peace of mind that comes from knowing why you act the way you do and how to change it, is truly liberating. It's the inevitable awakening to your own power. If this deep dive into internal narratives resonated with you, and if you're tired of the endless cycle of trying and failing because your own mind is holding you back, then I invite you to keep this conversation going. Don't just watch this and move on. What's one limiting explanation you're going to challenge and reframe today? Share it in the comments below. Your transparency not only commits you to action, but also inspires this incredible community of people who are also seeking real transformation, not just temporary fixes. If you're ready to build that authentic, productive self, subscribe to the channel. It's not about the numbers. It's about building a tribe of conscious creators and doers.